Well, our industry is a little bit behind a number of other industries with respect to collaboration. The contract relationship we have within the oil and gas industry is quite transactional in its format. And as a result of that, we're not making the most of some of the good ideas we can get from the supply chain. And sometimes in transactional relationships, we get to conflict, and different parties are not making the most of the opportunities of working together. And that's very important because we've had a history over the last 10, 15 years of not delivering projects as they were planned. So project collaboration is a tool for enhancing our common objectives, which is to deliver projects in a safe and reliable way.
Great. Well, welcome to our Project Collaboration Toolkit webinar. That was William Lindsay from Shell with a short video from the ECITB website. My name's Karen Cherrill. I hope many of you know me. I'm a partner at Kingsfield Academy, and Kingsfield Academy at the moment are the only sort of approved provider of the Project Collaboration Toolkit on behalf of the ECITB. And I'm joined today, really delighted that Tony Mapleston can join us today. Tony, along with William and some others, was heavily involved with the development of the PCT. So could you introduce yourself, Tony?
Yeah, certainly, Karen. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So as Karen said, my name is Tony Mapleston. I'm now a few years retired full-time from a career in project management, the management of engineering construction projects for clients, contractor and supply chain organisations. But I've been working with William and the Offshore Oil and Gas Project Management Steering Group pretty much since 2015 on the development of the Project Collaboration Toolkit and on piloting the toolkit against a number of pretty diverse projects. So I'm very, very pleased to be alongside Karen today and hopefully to tell you a little bit about how the toolkit is designed and how it's intended to work.
Great, thanks, Tony. And in the background, you won't see him. We've got Wayne who's helping with our webinar. And we've got a few slides that I want to sort of talk through with you. So maybe Wayne, if you could pull up the slides. And as I think William started by saying, the whole purpose and sort of raison d'etre for the PCT was to try to put together something that addressed this the conflict that can arise on projects from a pretty transactional kind of relationships. And the focus of the PCT is all about relationships and how we can do that much better. And as Tony said, it's been through a number of pilot schemes and road tested by some pretty major players mainly in the upstream offshore industry in the UK. But it could be applied to any sector. So I just wanted to ask you, Tony, as to why, when you were developing it, did you decide that the relational and behavioural side was the thing that you really wanted to bring out in this toolkit?
Well, I think, Karen, that certainly in the oil and gas industry, you could argue that the sector has too much process and procedure. And I think that project managers really expressed the view that it was really required within the sector was an approach to developing the kind of behaviours that would get the sector away from the traditional adversarial and adversarial behaviours and the conflict that have been experienced traditionally in delivering projects.
Mm-hmm.
So the toolkit was kind of developed, starting in 2015 in response to the circumstances, and it's history now, but it's repeating itself. Low oil prices and a real need to drive change within the approach to project delivery. And it was really, even though it kind of looks in the way that it's presented, it looks a little bit like a workflow. It really, if you look at the guidance that it contains, it really just does focus on getting the right kind of behaviours from all of the project delivery stakeholders. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that focus on as much of the supply chain as you can, and bringing that supply chain together that seems to bring the I mean, we'll look at some of the real demonstrable benefits of using this toolkit as we go through this, in terms of cost savings, schedule savings, lack of man marking, all of these things, because what underpins it all is trying to build trust, isn't it? It's how do we create a trusting, lasting relationship, and that's what this sort of process is designed to do, I think.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Karen. I mean, you could argue that that's the ingredient that's been missing in the past. There's been really very little foundation of trust between the delivery stakeholders to typical projects, and certainly the toolkit recognises that in its first phase, that you've got to actually start developing a basis of trust for people to be able to work closely and to effectively collaborate.
Yeah, perfect. So as you can see from this wheel, there's 4 stages to the toolkit, and we're just going to very quickly take you through the 4 stages. If I could have the next slide, please, Wayne. And those, the first stage is about establishing a collaborative environment. And you can see I've mapped this against ISO 44001, which is the standard for collaborative working. So it's fully in line with this internationally recognized standard, and there are lots of sort of overlaps with that. And these are the main steps for the first phase, which is before you've even signed your contract. This is about setting up a collaborative environment. And although there are lots of stages in here, I think the one I just wanted to ask Tony about, which is really fundamental in this stage, is the stakeholder management conference. Because this is the opportunity, I think, for all the key parties to get together and start to build those relationships, build that trust. And I wondered if you just wanted to talk a little bit about the stakeholder management conference and what you found from the pilot studies on that, Tony.
Yes, fine. Thanks, Karen. So I think the first thing to say is that the toolkit can be actually used, by anybody or any project. If you like the look of something that any of the phases contains, you'll probably be able to see that it might add value to what you're trying to achieve. But the real complete value of adopting the toolkit is if you're actually working from the very early stages of front-end loading to, if you like, put together a collaborative delivery strategy. And that's why phase 1 is probably the most important phase in the whole of the toolkit. We found that working with pilot projects, that the important step of holding a stakeholder management conference is key in many ways. And in fact, I've worked recently with new projects that have been looking to design, and I've actually facilitated the delivery of stakeholder management events within those projects. What it allows you to do is to check in on the previous step around collaborative capability assessment. So there are a number of different ways that organisations who are about to get involved in a collaborative project can actually assess where their organisation and their organisational culture stands in terms of being sort of open to collaborative working. So you can check in on that element. You can certainly use the stakeholder management conference to start to develop the basis of trust between the people who are actually attending and participating. We found that looking at project objectives during the stakeholder management conference is a good thing, because you can actually start the process of early alignment of the various organisations to a common set of objectives. So people aren't actually working to their own agendas from that point onwards. And I think finally, just a mention of the behavioural charter, you can actually start to talk about how organisations and their representatives should be shaping up to support collaboration on the project activity.
Perfect. No, that's really good. And I think For each one of these steps, I should say that the PCT is free to download from the ECITB website. We can send you a link after this webinar. And with each of these steps, there's a set of guidance, notes and comments, and references to other useful tools that can be used on that. So this just sort of summarizes the steps. As Tony says, it's a bit of a pick and mix, so you don't have to be constrained by this. It's not so much about rigidly following the process as around the conversations that you can choose to have and the building of behaviors and relationships along the way. So you can kind of custom fit it to suit your project is the message from this. So if I could have the next slide, Wayne. Carry on, Tony, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to mention there one last comment about the final step there, establishing contracting principles.
Yep.
Our experience today with pilot projects and other projects that are starting off work with the toolkit is very few are actually, sort of adopting a partnering, alliancing type contracting model.
Yep.
So there's some good and bad about that. So the good things are that even using traditional contracting, frameworks and models, organisations have actually, found, some real success in working, to a collaborative strategy. But I think, the real enemy, I think, as far as collaboration is concerned, is transaction. You mentioned the word transactional earlier on, Karen. Fixed price lump sum contracts tend to drive self-interested behaviour, and that's where the problems start. So, whatever model organisations adopt for their particular projects would hopefully be away from that end of the transactional scale, and the contract should offer some kind of collective incentive for the organisations to support the the project objectives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're not going to talk about it today, but Tony and a colleague of mine, John, are working on a collaborative working agreement, which is a model form of contract that actually fits, superbly with this PCT. So watch this space, because we're going to be talking about that a lot this autumn. So the toolkit also it's got some checklists there. It's got some ways that you can visually self-assess how you're doing against the various components in there, in order that you can, because this is all about communication as well. This is about making sure that you're bringing everybody in the supply chain along with you. So, nothing particularly fancy. This isn't about a fancy technology or software solution. This is about the conversations that you're going to have, and then tracking that in a very simple way. So if we could have the next slide, Wayne, thank you. Tony's already spoken about the fact that this has been piloted on I think about 5 projects so far, I think, Tony, over the last 18 months or so. And what we thought with all of these pilot case studies are available for you to have a look at on the ECITB website. And I thought we would just sort of showcase and use this Brent Bravo project as a way to actually show you how the toolkit was used and just draw out a few points from it. So you were instrumental in this case study, Tony, I think. So I don't know whether you wanted to highlight a few points about it.
Yeah, so this was one of the very early pilot projects that we looked at when pretty closely after the toolkit was launched. William Lindsay, who actually fronted up the little video that we kicked off with today, is probably the best example of a collaboration champion within his organisation, Shell, I think. So if anybody on the call is really looking for a role model for collaboration champion, William would be it. But William within Shell is the project director for the Brent decommissioning program, and William was involved in setting up Brent Bravo on a collaborative strategy with lots of supply chain partners, but with principal partners Wood Group and Stork Technical Services. Brent Delta had actually been the first offshore platform within the Brent field to go through the process of preparation for decommissioning, and Brent Bravo followed. But what Brent Bravo did was to genuinely create an integrated project delivery team. So from shell, from stock, from wood, the project really operated on the principle of the best person for the role. There was absolutely no overlap between individuals on the project delivery team, and there was certainly no man marking. So the project actually experienced something like a 20% reduction in the staffing cost. The team really did work very, very closely with significant spin-off benefits. An example of how integrated the team was, I think when the project got into some of the offshore preparation phases, we actually had Shell employees actually working under the supervision of stock and wood, which is quite unusual.
It's really unusual, yeah.
But such was the effort that went into tightly integrating the team, that was actually possible, and it worked very, 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 very well. Some of the innovations that came about on Brent Bravo. And of course, there was lots of learning from the Delta experience, but lots of those innovations came from stock, wood, as well as shell, I think. So it actually created an environment that allowed all of the partners to clearly work together to look at the best way of delivering the project scope.
And maybe if you just show us the next slide, Wayne, one of the that you mentioned before, one of the key things to sort of agree right up front as early as you possibly can is a kind of a behavioural charter, and you can see all the parties that are signed up to this. So we've all seen these kind of mission statements and stuff on project walls. Tony, what do you think is different, or is there something different about this kind of behavioural charter and this commitment?
Yeah, I think it's different because you can see it's very simple in its structure, but the content has been discussed, communicated, and agreed between all of the parties to the project. So this behavioural charter will have been agreed by leadership and management representatives from all of those organisations, and importantly, it was then used to cascade to other members of the team. So throughout all levels of project delivery, people had actually recognised what had been agreed as the desirable behaviours for all parties, and had actually bought into it. I'm a big fan of behavioural charters because it's the process of developing them and what's done with them, which is the important part.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the output. This is the output, but it's the conversations that have had the hard one, and maybe some challenging conversations that have been had to get to this point to document it. That's really important, isn't it? If you could just give us the next slide, Wayne. This is some of the ratings that the team was able to do in terms of how they kind of scored themselves for the first three phases. You can see for the established phase, the setup, and then the execute, and feel like they really embraced this. So I don't know how long you were involved with it and got to see on this, Tony, but does this sort of resonate with what you saw in terms of the way and the extensiveness with which they use the toolkit?
Yeah, it certainly does, Karen. So right from the very onset, I actually attended a few meetings with the with the integrated team, and it was quite clear that they at various stages of the project lifecycle wanted to check in against how they were performing against the toolkit. So they had some very, very good presentation materials which actually traffic lighted where they were against a number of the elements within phases of the toolkit. So I'm quite satisfied that the scoring that you see here, which is extremely positive, 88% in terms of where the project was in terms of establishing its collaborative environment, 93% in collaboration, and in execute 100%. Well,
Yeah.
if the setup's right, moving into execute, it becomes almost an exercise in just making sure that execution is delivered efficiently, against all of the preparation that's been done in the previous two phases. Yeah.
And it comes back to, we talk about this so often, but consistently fail to put it in practice. It's all in the planning, isn't it? It's all in whichever literature you read, whether you're reading lessons learned of projects that have gone wrong, etc., etc. The whole message always is put more time and effort into the early stages of project developments, and you will reap the benefits. We still struggle to do this frequently, and we could debate that for hours. But that's what this toolkit is designed to do: is to have those preventative conversations and some of those difficult conversations as early as you possibly can, so that when the challenges get thrown up and when these things become difficult, you've got the resilience built into the system, because you're not starting, you've already had some of those conversations that are going to enable it. Yeah, I don't know whether that fits with what you think, Tony, but we've both been in this industry a long time, and spending more time up front is what I think we both feel quite passionately about.
Yeah, and it just raises an interesting point. Back to the behavioural charter, one of the values of actually having a behavioural charter in place is that, in the same way that projects regularly review performance and progress, projects working a collaborative strategy should regularly review where they stand in terms of achieving the collaboration objectives. So the behavioural charter becomes something that becomes a checkpoint.
Yes.
On a regular basis, are people behaving in accordance with the way that was set out within that charter? And if there are one or two examples of behaviour that doesn't fit with that, then of course the project can look at that and address the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've got a mechanism to do it. You've been given permission to hold everybody in the supply chain to account on the conversations and agreements that were reached. So it makes that so much easier. Yeah. Can I have the next slide, Wayne? Thank you. We'll come back at the very end to some of the real outputs from Brent Bravo, but I just wanted to make sure that we showed you sort of what all of the phases are. So this is the second stage. So this is when you've you're really at the early stages. It might be just before or just after contract signature, but you're selecting the project team. The key phase, part of this for me is 2.2 here, which is establishing common project delivery objectives and aligning. And as Tony was saying, you could even start thinking about this and addressing this during the stakeholder management phase. But this is really now starting to, it's your classic funnel from starting very wide, and now we're starting to, okay, so what are these mechanisms that how are we going to create a project environment that's truly enabling and collaborative? What are all the documents that we need? So we're starting to move into slightly more tasky things, but all things that are really essential. So I don't know whether you've got any particular points on phase 2 or things that you.
Yes, I think as you rightly say, Karen, common project delivery objectives and alignment to them is absolutely essential. So at this stage, bringing the project team together, the project objectives should be available in an agreed language that can then be used for, if you like, onboarding anybody who comes onto the project team from that point onwards. So the real aim is to make sure that everybody involved in project delivery at whatever level recognises what the common objectives are and can actually buy into them and support them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just comment about one or two of the other elements within this phase as well. So agreeing and documenting the project scope, well, that sounds, a little bit processy, but the intention there is to make sure, because lots of projects don't do it, thoroughly and correctly. But when the project's at this, stage, just ahead of going into execute, the division of scope, the responsibilities for who's going to do what should be absolutely crystal clear. It may be that some projects actually have some unresolved uncertainties, but as long as that's recognised, that shouldn't be a problem. But you know, the recommendation from the toolkit is that there's certainly a lot of effort put into sort of agreeing and documenting the project scope as the starting point for sort of moving into you know, subsequent delivery. Step 2.5, the management of scope and change. I mean, this is an area which typically drives very, very poor behaviour on projects. So as soon as we get into change, lots and lots of organisations start to get into you know, the mode of self-interest. So the toolkit promotes the thought that it's much better to have a discussion up front about how change will be managed. And it isn't about the process. You know, lots of projects and most projects should actually have a tried and tested process for handling change. But it's actually the attitudes and behaviours that are expected of the parties to the project, which is more important, I think. So
Absolutely.
Contractors shouldn't look for an opportunity to increase margin around change opportunity. And I think on the flip side of that, clients shouldn't actually unreasonably expect you know, the contractor and supply chain organisations to handle change if it's not going to be fairly compensated. And in my experience and over my career, I've seen lots and lots of examples where those kind of polarised, self-interested behaviours have been exhibited.
No, I 100% agree with that, Tony. And I like what you're saying here is you know, as engineers, we might be defaulting to go, well, of course, you know, we're going to write a scope document, and of course we're going to have a change procedure, but the whole conversation around the PCT is about the behaviours and the relationships, not the pieces of paper. You know, so that's the real message, I think, from how you saw the PCT being used and its reason, and with very real you know, financial results. This isn't some woolly, soft, you know, cozy relate. This is about in the best. Maybe if you could have the next slide, Wayne, please. This is about, you know, the project and us all understanding, and I'm sure everybody on this call knows that, you know, that these projects are nothing more than networks of relationships. It's people who deliver projects, and how you conduct those relationships really ensure project success. And we've all worked on projects where you can feel the dynamic, you can feel the relationships, you can feel a willingness to resolve challenges. We're all problem solvers. Problems are the definition of what projects are about, but it's how do we go about solving those problems, and how do we do it in a way that isn't completely focused only on self-interest. If you go to the next slide, please. One of the conversations that we can have is thinking about those differing and conflicting interests, because this is where some of the rubs start to occur, because necessarily the parties in the supply chain have got long-term versus short-term interests, have got this being a cost versus this being a revenue. So having conversations about this and really thinking about how do we align these interests. We've all got an interest, and you know, it sounds, you know, twee to talk about, you know, creating win-win positions, but that's what we're trying to do in an open and collaborative fashion, I think. So maybe the next slide, please, Wayne. So maybe one more. There we go. So after we've set it up, then we're into what you were saying. You know, if we've done a job properly, then this phase should be relatively straightforward. Unfortunately, you know, certainly from Kingsfield's perspective, this is where we spend a lot of our time trying to untangle conflict and disputes and things that may have been able to be largely avoided, or not certainly been the same scale of problem. So I'd like to hear your opinion on this, which, say, if it's all done properly, the theory is it should be straightforward, but I think we'd all recognise that the practice is something somewhat different.
Yeah, I think so, Karen. So in the previous step, there was an element which talked about you know, the processes and standards that you know, that are agreed to be used on the project, and that's an important you know, prerequisite to starting to look at how the organisations can collaborate around project control. So, lots of participants have probably seen projects where there's massive overlap between the work which is done within the various organisations to control their part of the schedule or the budget. The toolkit promotes that, to the best of everybody's ability, there should be a single aligned approach to, sort of one version of the truth, if you like, in terms of the status of the project. The second element.
One schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. So there shouldn't be two versions of a project schedule. One which is actually held by any organisation internally, and one version which is actually supported externally. I mean, it's just wasteful in terms of the resources required to do that. And it's the same with reporting. That I've seen lots of projects where the preparation of a monthly report becomes a full-time job for a team of people. I mean, that's patent nonsense when the effort and energy should be going into actually moving the project forward and helping it, deliver and get over the finishing line. Yeah. Stakeholder risk and reward. Well, if the setup has actually allowed the project delivery stakeholders to sort of look at some kind of incentivized framework, then clearly the process of performance measurement has to be a step within the the execute phase. So the parties to the project need to know where they stand in terms of measurement against agreed KPIs. Quality, safety, and environmental management. These are all areas where, again, traditionally there is lots of overlap. So you'll tend to get clients and contractors and supply chain organisations working to their own health and safety or quality plans. And the toolkit promotes that, again, to the best of the project's ability, there should be a single approach to the way that all of those important topics are managed. I mean, just in the area of technical assurance, I worked on a project when I was based up in Aberdeen, a major project where there was actually a client approach to technical assurance and the EPC contractors approach to technical assurance. And both of these views were actually run in parallel. So the amount of time that actually took to get anything, through the approval loop and actually issued for construction was just, very significant, to say the least. And the project really battled to, achieve its schedule objectives. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we've seen it so many times. So. So this sort of single approach, which is advocating and not man marking, is all founded on having a strong element of trust at the base of this. So if I go to the next slide, Wayne, that would be great. And this is where at Kingsfield we kind of thinking, well, we've worked on so many projects over the years, and so many projects which unfortunately many of our projects are ones we call politely in distress, that have gone wrong. And what you can see when you go in to talk to project teams is you can see, smell, sense, and visibly see that distrust that has materialized. And really an inability to handle conflict in a constructive manner, very polarized views. They're complete load of rubbish, and we're doing a fantastic job. And this kind of we kind of look at, well, how does this deteriorate when we all start off at the beginning with a team building, or we all go to the pub together if it's in the UK and other times, but we set off with this grand plan that we're all going to work together, and then so often we end up in a very poor state of affairs by the end. And how do you think that we've talked about it a bit already, Tony, but is there anything else to add on how the PCT can can stop this deterioration at every stage, you know, rather than waiting until we're in a situation which often is quite irretrievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think we said it before, Karen, that the real value is in putting the effort in up front. So in the very, very early project stages, getting the environment for collaboration established, setting up the project correctly. If you can actually get past all of the steps within phases 1 and 2 of the toolkit, you should really not be running a major risk of relationships breaking down and getting into the kind of problems with claims and other issues, disputes that traditionally come along later in projects. So I think the organisations that actually vote for delivering projects collaboratively, whether they be clients, those principal entities responsible for delivery, contractors, subcontractors, supply chain partners, if you get everybody buying into the concept of collaboration early on, then I think that should actually get people working from a foundation of trust, which will carry through the subsequent phases of the life cycle. Yeah, that's the key.
I agree, but I also think that, particularly as you've got certain obvious gates through the execution of a project, the transition from engineering to the construction site, for example, or the moving from the critical sort of phases of construction into commissioning, where I think you need to come back and revisit these. The teams will be different, the people will be different. You cannot, it's like saying we're going to do one team building at the very beginning of a job and then going, well, tick that box, we've done that, and never coming back to it again. So I think the principles are all agreed up front and committed to, but I think there's a strong need to keep refreshing this and to keep it updated. Otherwise, you can't guarantee that it's going to stay in place.
Yeah, you can overcome some of those difficulties, I think, through just looking at engaging everybody who's even engaging everybody as early as possibly as early as practically possible. I think within the life cycle. But you're right, Karen. It has to be a continuous process. You don't just actually sort of look at setting up the project and then we've done the job and let's leave the back end to look after itself. It has to be a continuous process of, supporting the relationships that are required to deliver the project successfully.
Yeah, great. Could I have the next slide, Wayne, please? So I think this is just building on that. I'm not really going to talk much about this slide. A model that we use a lot in workshops that we do is Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is a very useful way of talking about how do you build high performing teams, and in this context, the team is the whole supply chain that's involved in this, not just my team. This is about how do we create this environment where we can all perform really well, because the fact of the matter is not many people come to work intending to do a bad job. Most people want to perform, but they tend to be constricted, whether that's through the contract, whether that's through the message from the senior management, whether it's through a lack of collaboration that exists. So I think working on this kind of some of these models in some of the workshops that you may have along the way would be really, really useful. If I could have the next slide, Wayne. So the final phase, which is one that we that often we rush to finish and get out and move on to the next project, but is the one that's so valuable. And I guess you guys have, well, I know that you guys have done a lot of work out with regard to the pilot schemes. Is how do we effectively close out and learn? And this is a small world, whether you're in the oil and gas industry, you're in the nuclear industry, you're in the water sector, it's a small world, and the objective of everybody is to continue relationships and to continue working together, because you're going to get masses of efficiencies if that supply chain gets to work together again and knows each other. So what were your thoughts about key messages from phase 4, Tony?
Yeah, well, I think the whole process of establishing a collaborative approach to project delivery isn't an easy option. Let's be fair about this. It takes quite a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort to actually get into the right kind of relationships with different delivery partners. So this phase is pretty important in terms of looking at what went well. So if the collaboration strategy actually worked, what did it deliver? What went well on the project, and did we achieve our objectives, or were the objectives only partially delivered? What didn't go well? So if we were going about the process of using a collaborative approach on the next project, what would we do differently? And then the important question, so based on our experience, is it appropriate to consider a similar collaboration on the next project? And I personally don't see any problem in looking at keeping the relationships with contractors, subcontractors, and supply chain partners if they've been party to good performance and successful delivery. Now, I know that organisations do have some constraints about making sure that pricing is market competitive. But I must say I'm not a fan of the traditional fixed price tendering approach, because that tends to deliver organisations who probably are those that haven't actually appreciated all of the project risks. I think we can all kind of we all know and understand the pitfalls associated with some of the traditional selection processes. If you put the effort in, if it's worked, why not stay with it and
absolutely
keep the relationships going for the next project, and maybe it's the next program of work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It doesn't happen an awful lot, but it's and we're moving into an extraordinary time at the moment, and we're going to need to pull some real nuggets. We're going to need to learn some massive lessons and look at doing our projects even more effectively, cost effectively, time effectively as possible. And you've got to think that if you've got a team that work together well, why on earth would you break it up? But as you say, that's going to challenge some organisations' procurement departments. But let's challenge it. Let's challenge that. Okay, we're getting loads of really good questions in, and I'm going to sort of bring our conversation to a close in a minute or two, and allow a good 15 minutes for questions, and because I think it's fantastic, we're getting loads in, and I want to make sure we make the most of Tony's time. So
yeah, I think just one final comment from me, Karen. I think, because I do realise we need to get into questions, but for those on the call who think, well, of course, the collaboration toolkit had its origins in oil and gas. Don't be put off by that, because it had its origins in oil and gas for very, very good reasons. But I think the whole of the UK engineering construction industry is facing some of those same challenges in the present day. And everything that's contained within the toolkit is about, if you like, generic project management behaviour. It's transferable, it's applicable to engineering construction project delivery in whatever sector across the UK.
And internationally, we've got lots of our clients and other people calling in from all over the world. So there's nothing unique about the UK. There's nothing unique about oil and gas in this. So yeah, everything is eminently transferable. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus now. I mean, if you could pause the slide set, Wayne, and that's fantastic. And I'm going to see we've got some really good questions here, Tony. So the first question from Mark is saying, interested in your view, Tony, on the independence of the collaboration champion. What's the experience of having an owner appoint the collaboration champion as opposed to somebody completely independent? And the collaboration champion, for those of you not familiar with this, is a key person who is really advocating understands this process, drives it, and is the real, well, as it says, the champion for this all the way through. So good question from Mark is who should the collaboration champion come from, and can they be totally independent?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I think my answer would be it's definitely appropriate to have a collaboration champion within whatever organization is the lead project entity. Now, it could be the client, it might be some other organization that's been appointed by a client to actually, take the lead in delivering a project. I think having a champion within whichever organization is taking the lead is probably appropriate. I would then go on to say that it's also appropriate to have collaboration champions in other organizations. So you don't just have to have one on the project. And it's actually quite useful having somebody within each of the, certainly the most significant organizations within the, within the collaborative arrangement. It's an advantage to have a number of those people who are championing collaboration within their own, within their own organisation. And the reason it's an advantage is, organisations have been stuck in tradition, and the culture within lots of organisations that are starting to move into collaborative delivery is still going to actually present some resistance to change.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's important that whoever actually takes up the role of collaboration champion has sufficient sway within their organisation to be able to win some important arguments. So if somebody comes up, I'll give you an example. Technical leads, quite often, throw obstacles in the way of, different organisations working collaboratively, because they have an important role to maintain technical standards, maintain them within their own organisation. You need somebody who's actually able to work internally to be able to overcome some of those, kind of potential pitfalls that might be thrown in the path of, collaborative progress.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Tony. A second question from Michael saying, have you any data on the ratio of contracts and examples? It helps support early conversations if we've got some proof points. So have we got any facts and figures around this that have come out from the pilot studies that we've done so far?
I think most of the data regarding what pilot projects have delivered are probably contained within the case studies. And of course, you'll appreciate that there's a certain amount of confidentiality in the training board, ECITB, who I've represented, in terms of the toolkit. Lots of organisations haven't shared detailed data regarding project delivery performance. So I can't really say much more than look at the case studies. If you feel as if you need more substantial data or more detail, then try and contact somebody from one of the respective project teams to see if they're prepared to actually have a conversation and tell you more.
Yeah, but Michael, I think most, all of them are there's a direct reduction in costs, in team costs, from not man marking. Most of them are reporting capital cost savings, and some of them is quite significant. And it depends on the type of project. Some of these are offshore projects, so the delivery date is kind of fixed anyway. But they are all sort of reporting that schedules are achieved or underplayed. So the results coming out of this are positive, but it's in its relatively early phases. So we wouldn't be advocating this or doing this, and it will never work and gain traction unless it can deliver on reducing costs and schedules. So without impairing safety and quality. So
I think the pilot projects were, quite a diverse set of different projects of different size, different scope, different complexity. They were selected on that basis deliberately, so we could actually trial the toolkit content against a range of quite different projects. Certainly on large projects with lots and lots of complex stakeholder interactions, they've demonstrated real benefit. But I think the benefits have been actually different, you know, and they're presented in the case studies differently for each project.
Yeah.
So the experiences were quite different, I think, on each. Some like Brent Bravo, you know, really sort of highlighted the benefit of you know, integrated team working. The Calata field development project experienced a real benefit in being able to reduce schedule time. So for a hydrocarbon field development, that actually got the record for the fastest delivery, you know, well test results to you know, getting first oil. And schedule reduction, of course, reads massive reduction in cost as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So you know, there's lots and lots of evidence, I think, available, but you know, the depth of data, I think, probably still resides within the you know, the project organisations themselves.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, a good question here from Arne, saying, you know, collaboration needs to start as early as possible, but before you can start, you need to have the parties identified. So how do clients start the partnering of the supply chain, and what do they do with their ITB regarding the commercial model? So it's this you know, this, you know, how do we get competitive bids if we're starting to work with people and committing to them too early? So how did you see that managed, or what are your thoughts on that, Tony?
And one of the projects that is actually still running, you know, which is a pilot for the Toolkit, they actually held a stakeholder management conference in the very early stages and invited every organisation, significant organisation, that would be on the tender list. So they decided to actually, you know, quite openly share some of the you know, the client data with organisations who might not actually make it through the tendering process. Which I think was
it's part of the beauty parade, you know. It's part of the, are you willing to engage with us this way? Because it's something we value in terms of what we're going to evaluate your bid against.
Right, so they certainly took a completely different approach to, if you like, the conventional, you know, tender price driven approach to selection. And I would certainly be a strong advocate of, you know, for collaborative performance and delivery, you need to be using a different set of selection criteria. And yes, you know, price is important, but I would actually, you know, kick off selection with some criteria around who can I work best with. Do I have track record with any of the organisations that have the capability to support me on this project? And then somewhere further down the line, start looking at how I can work with them to establish what I can be confident in is the right price for the delivery of their portion of the scope.
Great. Another good, well, they're all good questions actually, but another question from Kevin saying, section 2.1, so even knows the section, which is really good, mentions the selection of project team members. What tools or models would you suggest supports the analysis of behaviours? And this comes, you know, are we going to use Belbin or something to select the right people, or what were your thoughts on that? Getting the right people on the bus.
Yeah, Kevin's, you know, on exactly the right track there. So the important principle is, rather than selecting members of the team just based upon technical skills, you know, so if you're selecting somebody who needs to contribute in the area of project controls, they've clearly got to have sufficient skill in that area to be able to perform the task. But as important, I think, is their ability to exhibit emotional intelligence, you know, to work in interpersonal relationships with the people who are going to be around them within the project environment. So, you know, Belbin, I think, is a good, you know, a good tool. You know, some of the other profiling tools, I think, are probably relevant to, you know, the process of team selection. The toolkit mentions the judgment index, which is which is a tool that I've actually used in the past, and it's I think particularly pertinent, because it actually gives you an indication of in the world of work who can actually use their emotional intelligence to come up with the with the right kind of approaches. I think, yeah. So we've used that, I think, for profiling project people in different organisations that I've worked with in the past. But I think the answer is behaviour and some kind of indicators of how people are, what their attitudes and what their personal values are, is probably as relevant to technical skill, I think, when selecting for a collaborative project team position.
Yeah. And again, there are many tools that we all know out there for this. And as usual, my comment on this is the tool isn't so important as the way that you use it and the conversations that you're having. They could all probably do a reasonable job. So I've got a couple of questions from Vikas. So how do we deal with some of the stakeholders who aren't supportive to the projects or the collaboration that we're going to try and put in this project? So what do we do with those people who are resisting or blockers or challengers, and how do we deal with that?
Well, if I understand correctly, we're talking here about internal individual stakeholders within organisations.
It looks like that, but I guess it could be, yeah. But yes, let's assume that's what the question is.
I think my answer would be that and this is back to what we were saying about collaboration champions. Somebody has got to have sufficient sway within each organisation to be able to say, we've committed to working the project in this way, and that's how we're going to deliver it. Now, when the inevitable change resistors, sort of raise their heads within different organisations, I think the process is just simply the way that any organisation would deal with resistance to change. You can either work with them to try and convert them into thinking along the lines of the commitment that's been made. But if they continue to resist change, you've probably got to try and move them out.
Yeah. And that's in all leadership, whatever field that you look at. You need the right people on the bus, and if you've worked hard to see whether they can get there and they don't, ultimately it doesn't matter if they're the most brilliant person, technically or whatever. You don't need them in the team. You really don't need them in the team.
I think it's down to the old adage, Karen, of if it can't do or won't do.
Yes.
If it can't do, then it's somebody you can perhaps spend some time with to try and give them the capability to work in an aligned way. If it won't do, that's something that requires a different response. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Wayne, I wonder if you could just pull up the last couple of slides on the presentation, because there's and you move to the next one, if that's okay, probably. So this is what we and somebody's asked a question about, okay, so how do we get started? How can you support us? And how do we try this out? And these the various phases are there. We've seen what those various phases are. And certainly, we at Kingsfield are really we really want to help ECITB promote this idea, to get this toolkit used. It's been used successfully in a number of pilot schemes now, and we really want to support it being used, because we really believe in it and believe that it can demonstrate real success and value on your projects. Whether that's working with the collaboration champions, training the collaboration champions about the kind of behaviours that are needed, or working with a team, facilitating stakeholder workshops, and also, we've got, certainly at Kingsfield, we've got lots and lots of experience of training and coaching in a lot of these behavioural skills, like building trust and overcoming the 5 dysfunctions, enabling healthy conflict, all of these kind of things, which are most people have used to say, this is the soft side of project management and project execution. But actually what we're coming back to is this is actually the heart of it, and what can make the difference between a successful project and one that isn't. So have the next slide, please, Wayne. So if you want to know any more about it, we'll send you an email. You're very welcome to contact us. Certainly, if you want to apply it, certainly suggest maybe to start with training some of the key players, and Tony and I are available to help with that. Really interested to support that. Maybe choose a pilot project of your own, you know, and we're very happy to help you guide you through the process, work as your collaboration partner, and let's get more evidence that it works in whatever industry sector you're in. So I just wanted to finish with the final slide there, Wayne, and this is the output from the Brent Bravo case study. So, you know, to the question of what was actually achieved, the size of the team was reduced by 20%. The project was delivered within a very tight 11-month schedule, and the base work scope was significantly under budget. So and you know, and compared to the Delta project, which Tony mentioned at the beginning, like for like, some of the costs there's a reduction of about 70%. So you kind of can't argue with some of these numbers that are coming out of it. So final words to you, Tony.
Yeah, I think that's right. So
yeah,
just, you know, to the Brent Bravo case study, you know, people have said, oh, well, of course, you know, Brent Delta preceded Bravo, so there was lots and lots of lessons learned there, and that's an undeniable truth. But the 11-month schedule that the preparation for topsides removal was, you know, was undertaken in, compared to a period of some 3 to 4 years for the similar preparation of Brent Delta, and you know, you know, we talked earlier about the you know, the value of integrated team and the impact that had on staffing levels and staffing costs. So you know, Brent Bravo was the preparation for Brent Bravo lift was an undeniable success. William Lindsay had a conversation with some time ago, and he said, well, of course, you know, we're talking about collaboration and the fact that transactional type approaches to projects can quite often deliver conflict and adversity. But, you know, there are occasions when transactional arrangements are quite adequate. And he cited the arrangement that Shell had with Allseas, the organisation that was contracted to actually lift the Bravo topsides off the jacket. And clearly, when organisations have a clear understanding of what they've got to, you know, deliver, what their scope of work is, the organisations have agreed it. They're, you know, they're tied into a common aim in terms of what needs to be done. That's absolutely fine. But as soon as you get into levels of complexity, and back to the previous slide that we showed, lots and lots of complex interactions and organisations and interfaces, we've got to be looking for a better way of delivering than we've traditionally taken.
Yeah, and that's really wise words to end with, I think, there, Tony. So I just wanted to thank you so much for your for joining us on this this webinar. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, always a pleasure to listen to you and learn from your experience. So that's really great.
Well, thank you, Karen. If anybody on the call would like to, you know, ask a question or have a chat about you know, the approach, I'm quite happy for you to share my contact details, and I would look forward to hearing from people. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thanks, Tony, and thanks for Wayne in the background. And yeah, thank you for all of you who've joined us. We will be following this up with some thoughts on how to go about training collaboration champions and key members of the team. So so I hope you'll join us for a future webinar. And if you've got any questions or would like to know any more about it, then we'll also send around my email addresses and Tony's as well, so that you can get in touch. So thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for your questions, and have a good rest of your day. So thank you very much.
Thanks.